bookshop. It's the bookshop. It's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It is Sam Fightful, your host of John Updike's Ghost, the best little podcast about literature, reading, bookstores, all things printed word. Also, you have stumbled into what is actually the 50th episode of John Updike's Ghost with little asterisks. We did this little weird, half episode when Hannah was on TV. So technically we have released 50 podcasts, but this is the 50th episode by title, and therefore it is a wicked big deal. And I am joined in this wicked big deal, as always, by the lovely, the talented, and now best friend with Andre Dubus III, Hannah Harlow. How are you, Hannah?
Woo! I'm so good. So excited to be here on our 50th episode.
Woo-hoo!
And yeah, now I have a new best friend. It's very exciting.
I'm referring, of course, to the wildly successful Andre Dubus III event we did yesterday at the lovely Hastings House, which I enjoyed immensely. Hannah was in conversation with Andre, who was, as we were just saying amongst each other, a dude, and a very entertaining one at that. I would say he had the audience in the palm of his hand, and I especially liked when he showed up 2 minutes late. That's just what happens with creatives. We are not upset about it, Andre. And he greeted your husband warmly and remembered him from being at your house, at his house.
Yeah.
And then he turns to you and is like, "Oh, who are you?"
Who are you?
I was like, "How did you know Jason? What is happening?"
I was also at your house. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I remember." I was like, but that's okay. No, you come to realize he is the kind of guy that people meet him and they remember meeting him, but he meets thousands of people all the time. And so I'm sure he's just constantly like, everybody looks familiar. I probably met you at some point. It must be hard.
Yeah, no, he's a hardcore pro. He's a performer. Just from
he's a storyteller.
Well, yeah, from a technical standpoint, his mic control was immaculate.
Better than mine, yes.
Well, I'm just saying, this guy does a lot of events and knows his stuff, and it's fun to watch professionals, And he'd had a ton of stories. He was also, as we were saying to one amongst us ourselves, really genuine, actually, right? Like he had,
totally.
He's got the air of a talented dude who knows he's talented and has been feted many times, and it's impossible not to have a little bit of an ego when that happens. But he was genuinely super nice, super cool, loved working with the audience, signed for, I don't know, at least an hour. It
was an hour.
Really long time. And you were in the room. My impression is that he was like chatting up everybody for ways.
Totally. The other thing is you get the sense that he is genuinely grateful for the life that he's been given. And, if you've read Townie and listened to a bunch of his interviews and never really heard him talk, he had a rough upbringing. And he knows that, and I've heard him say this in interviews, because he works, I wanted to ask him this yesterday, I didn't, but he works, has worked in prisons and with incarcerated people.
Right, yeah.
And he knows that he very easily could have ended up in their place. And he's grateful that he found a way out, that he found a way to kind of end the cycle of violence. And then he's been gifted with this writing career.
Yeah, you could tell. And I love the fact that he teaches at UMass Lowell. And
said in the event yesterday, I have taught at the Ivy Leagues, and I would rather be at UMass Lowell. I'm really happy to be at UMass Lowell because he's working with people, who are grateful for every opportunity that they're given. These aren't people who have been privileged their whole life.
Yeah, and I think you just must get better stories. Part of why his stories are successful, I know you've been reading his stuff. I've only really sampled his stuff. I would not say I'm some sort of Andre Dubus completist, but just from his reading and from his talking, he has seen some shit And so that will find its way into your fiction. And I'm sure that when you are teaching like Ivy League kids who have been striving their whole lives to get into the Ivy League, they have seen almost zero shit and their stories have got to be boring. They just have to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think some people have been struggling with his most recent novel, at least getting into it, because it is not a happy story. You are, down in the dumps with this guy who's lost everything. And it's depressing. And I think people are like, this is too depressing. I don't want to read this, and you're like, but I think if people persevere, if you get past the first few chapters, he introduces hope. I mean, most of the book, I was sitting there, even up until the end, I was like, how's this guy going to get out of subsidized housing? He lives in chronic pain. He can't be the construction worker he used to be. What's he going to do for a job? And this is America for people living in poverty. How do you get out of poverty? And I couldn't see a way out for this guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, he's either going to die at the end or Andre's going to show us a way. So I'm not going to give away what happens because I honestly did not know the whole way through.
I loved that you asked him about how he inserted levity to kind of make up for the depressive parts. And he was like, I didn't.
Right.
He's like, I didn't do that, actually. It's just miserable.
It is just miserable. I helped him out and I was like, well, I think you added hope in there. He's like, oh, good.
But he also, he spoke like a real writer is supposed to speak. You're not really allowed to talk about kind of craft and intention that much when you're like a true artist, I think. And I almost don't want them to, like you're not a workman, you're an author and I love your stuff and I want you to act crazy. And I thought it was really cool. There's a few different questions that he got and he made it really clear that he just doesn't have a plan for his novel. Like he's not trying to say something. He's not trying to establish some theme. He's not trying to, he even said, he's also amazing about how he can just like throw out like Ezra Pound and Hemingway quotes off the top of his head. Like, I mean, come on.
Every time I've seen Andre speak a handful of times, maybe 3 or 4 times.
Does he always bust out the same quotes?
No, this is what I was going to say. Every time I've seen him, he's busted out different quotes.
No,
he's quoting like dozens of different things that he's read. And every time I'm like, how does he do this?
And they were effortless and they were always on point. Yeah. And I was like, God damn, I wish I could do that. Like I could.
What was yesterday? It was like Flannery O'Connor or I don't know. I was like, what? Last time you were quoting other authors. So how do you have all these at your fingertips?
No, it's amazing. He's legit. But he talked about how, there's this fictional writer's cliche that, the character made the decision for me. And he was like, that's bullshit. You're in charge of it. But then he was like, but it did sort of happen here. Usually,
he was like, oh, yeah. Tom Lowe told me, no, we're not going that direction.
Right. Like, he's like, usually I do a bunch of violence. And my character was like, I don't want to do violence.
Yeah. That's what I do. I mean, I do think there are kind of two types of writers, and there is a type of writer that is all about the craft and the intention and the like, I purposefully did this.
Right.
And then there's Andre, the other type of writer that is like, I am an artist and this, the muses speak to me and like, I just do my thing. And it's kind of amazing because you get these, like, so I did like a Andre Dubus deep dive last week. Mm-hmm. And, I finished Such Kindness, the newest novel. I read Townie a long time ago. I love Townie. I think Townie is a spectacular memoir.
Townie's what I've read. I can't remember when I read it, but I read it, 10 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, same. And, having grown up, not necessarily on the North Shore, but pretty close to it, and now living on the North Shore, that portrays a very different world from what we live in. And it is now kind of on the edges of like, he grew up in Haverhill and Newburyport, and Newburyport is now this like gentrified, like, every home costs $1 million plus, and it's beautiful. But like the Newburyport he grew up in was, an impoverished, like, place full of violence. And you're like, what? How did this happen? And now that exists in like Amesbury and still Haverhill and, wherever. But anyway, it's, it means a lot more to those of us who've lived here and can see it.
Yeah,
disappear.
We totally got burned about growing up in Andover. Do you see the face he made with?
No, because I was talking, but I was like,
he was
we
like,
grew up in Andover,
eh?
Mm-hmm. Well, because Andover, in Such Kindness, is where the bad guy lives.
Oh, the banker lives in Andover. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Who sells the character the adjustable rate mortgage, which basically makes him lose his house and lose everything. So he has this incredible like grudge, well-deserved, but he can't get over how much he hates this guy and wants him to suffer. And so he drives to his house in Andover. I was like, oh, shit.
Well, I think that's all fair. I also think it's interesting. I was thinking about it while he was talking. And the sort of trope that he represents in American society of, the kind of rough and tumble, but still morally okay and admirable, impoverished, tough guy.
Yeah.
Like, the James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause, the Jack Kerouac and Beats, where, even Hemingway really, like, where you got in fights and drank and caroused, and then you were also literary. Oh, now I also write books. That is almost completely gone from modern society.
Right.
Like you don't see that at all. If you see impoverished white men, they're like on meth or, racing car, I guess it's, Rebel Without a Cause or whatever, but there isn't that like literary bent to it ever anymore. Like it seems almost, hard to even imagine like that person goes home and reads a novel,
Right. I mean, I think Andre is sort of the end of an era, and even like his more recent books, like he has a great interview with Terry Gross that he recorded for Such Kindness. She had read Such Kindness and Townie kind of in succession, and so it was a conversation about those two books, and a lot of it was about violence and blah blah blah. But in that interview, he talks about how he himself, he was bullied as a kid and watched his siblings get beat up. He watched his sister or his brother get beat up. And he was like, I have to do something about this. I can't just stand and watch. I have to. So he went and started working out, bulked himself up, and started to become a tough guy, right? Where he stood up for himself. But he also became this person who stood up for women. I detest women. I detest violence against women. And so he would publicly protect women against these terrible men. And he talks about how everyone would like pat him on the back. Like police officers would be like, thanks for doing that. Thanks for, beating this guy to a pulp in defense of this woman. Right. And he just kind of talks about how messed up that was. Like, what he was doing was seemingly okay. Yeah,
even though it's vigilantism and violent and not really solving anything.
Yeah. And so, he has sort of moved beyond that. And so it's interesting to talk to him now. He is in his 60s and he is just like namasteing everybody without actually saying namaste.
Yeah, I know. Like, he really was.
Yeah. So you just...
And he was also so happy. It made me really good. He's clearly not a digital person. He printed out the directions, which is one of the reasons he's 2 minutes late. Yep. He does not have, I believe he does not have a smartphone. Is that what
he said? He's never had a smartphone.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going. I aspire to Andre. And, he reads poetry and I think he's very present and I think it comes out. But I do want to think about this idea of dudeness because, I think like the whole experience of masculinity is like a social discussion right now, especially, the right wing is all about, men aren't allowed to be men anymore. And we've talked a little bit about how while there's still plenty of patriarchy going on in the publishing industry, like there's not as many like male writers in the discourse anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's female writers who tend to like kind of dominate the lists and sales and stuff like now. So I was in the library and I found the new Richard Ford.
Yeah.
Which I feel like has gotten like zero press. I kind of barely knew it existed. And the sports writer was like a really big book. You know, this one, I think the Pulitzer Prize, right?
It was
Independence
award-winning.
Day. No, Independence Day won the Pulitzer Prize. That was the second one. Sports Writer was the first in the Frank Bascombe series. Then Independence Day won the Pulitzer Prize. And this is the, you know, the end of the trilogy. And I feel like it got really little press. Maybe I just didn't see it. We haven't really talked about it. It came out this year. And it's definitely, it feels like a relic. So it's actually kind of cool. And maybe it's why it always resonated with me. But so Frank Bascombe is basically dad's age. He's a boomer. And the sports writer is about his early career as a sports writer. Very, you know, Ford has a lot of Updike qualities, you know, super autobiographical stuff. He's a young writer. Hey, we're in the swinging 70s and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Has young kids, gets divorced, blah, blah, blah. Independence Day is, you know, in his 50s. He's become a real estate agent. His kids, you know, hate him. He's a shitty dad, you know, whatever. He always has this like kind of bumbling nice guy-ness, right? Again, it's a trope that really doesn't exist now. It's like, oh, you know, I'm sort of mildly misogynist and, you know, racist, but I'm lovable somehow because, oh, look at me, I'm an American, whatever, right? Yep. So now this book he's in his 70s and his 48-year-old son has ALS. And the book is about him taking care of his kid at the Mayo Clinic as his experimental trial ends. And then he convinces him to go to Mount Rushmore, drive in a truck to Mount Rushmore. Is like, hey, it's a thing to do. I went to Mount Rushmore with my dad. You know, I've never taken you there. We're here, you know. And their relationship is sort of terrible and broken. And the 48-year-old son, which is my age, obviously, has never like amounted to anything. He's like a security guard loser, you know, online forum guy who spends too much time watching football. And so his dad is like caring for him as, you know, he can barely get around. He's got to help him go to the bathroom, you know, he's an amazing sentence level writer. And I think it's the type of discussion that dudes need to have like way more. It's like it's a touchy feely dude book without, you know, being in that new language of touchy feeliness, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think Andre's book, Such Kindness, is similar in that he's estranged from his son, and the kind of driving force of the book becomes the main character trying to get to Western Mass to visit his son for his 20th birthday. And like his car gets impounded and he has no money and he gets a ride out there, but his son is in the hospital. And then, so he goes to the wrong hospital and, you know, it's like, he can't make that connection, but it's all about reconnecting, repairing that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, in general, it falls into a lot of things that I hate about men in popular media in that, you know, why does he have such a shitty relationship with his son? Why is it so hard to hang out with your kids? Like, why is everybody a serial divorcee? Like, there's never any stories or movies or books about, a happy marriage of 25 years and our lovely children, you know, because it's not, it's not interesting, right? Like, you know, you need that conflict tension and driving action. So I get that. I understand why it happens, but I think
it's a little bit of a trope now to be like, this is a shitty dad. He's a white dude. Poor him.
And like
so put upon.
Right. But it's also like, we can't possibly expect more, you know, like, hey, I'm in my 70s, divorced twice, still, you know, trying to like make out with younger women. And have a crappy relationship with my son, but oh, hey, what can you
Right.
expect?
Well, I love in the beginning of Such Kindness, he gets a note from his wife who's like, tell me why I should feel bad for you. You're a white guy who's had every opportunity in this world and you've still managed to fuck it all up.
Yeah.
Like, and so you're like, yeah. And then yet, you do feel bad for him.
Well, I think that's what Andre is good at, and what Richard Ford is good at is just making these people seem human. Just because you're privileged doesn't mean you're not human, doesn't mean you don't deserve empathy and sympathy when crappy things happen to you. And,
exactly. Yes.
And I think what it was interesting because someone asked him, Andre, who he was reading, and I thought he was going to say Richard Ford when he said Richard Russo. But I think Richard Russo does this really well too, right? He's got Somebody's Fool out or Nobody's Fool. I can't remember which one was which.
The third one in the Fool
series. Right. I've read the first two.
Everybody's Fool?
I can't remember. I don't know. Somebody's Fool, maybe. But when he said that, and he said that Russo is really great at character interiors. And I think that's what this book is, right? It's this first person character interior of a 72-year-old grandfather having to do some shit that he really wishes he didn't have to do, but just kind of dealing. And he's also very funny, right? Like, so I think you said that Andre didn't really do that, but in this, like, there are lots of lighthearted moments because he's really good at dark humor. So, that resonates with me too.
Yeah. I will mention while we're on this topic, I haven't read the New York Times book review from this past Sunday, but on the cover is a review of a book that's like 50 years of Miss Magazine.
Oh,
with like Gloria Steinem, a photo of Gloria Steinem and her crew. And my husband was perusing the table of contents, and he said, look at all the list of fiction books being reviewed. They're all by women, right? Or women identifying, and they were, and I thought that was cool. I'm pretty sure it was deliberate, I assume.
Probably. They did that on purpose with the Ms. cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that's where the industry, it's not an overcorrection, but it's a correction, is that there were a bunch of voices that really didn't get much consideration, and then now they're getting a lot of consideration. And,
I think also when you looked at the breakdown of fiction readers, it was like 70% of novels are being bought by women and read by women. So
it's not surprising. It's like, the NBA, right? If all the players are black, then we should have some black coaches. If all the readers are women, we should have some women writers,
Yeah.
Just makes sense.
Yeah, it does remind me, I'm sure you saw over the weekend, or maybe it happened sooner than that, but I was actually on the internet this weekend seeing a lot of the blowback about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame stuff. And
I didn't see. I didn't see. Oh, Jann Wenner. Yeah. The,
Rolling Stone.
Yeah, what's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame connection?
Well, he was on the board or whatever. He was like one of the guys making all the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame decisions over the past 30 years, and not, and then it was like, well, how many women were admitted into the Hall of Fame? Maybe if he hadn't been making all the decisions, there would have been more. Right.
No, that interview, I mean, in the music industry, it's sort of well known that Jann Wenner is a douche. Rolling Stone is what it is, and it maybe had some periods of greatness, but when you examine those periods, they're usually not that great. And it's all about the writers. It's not like he was doing anything all that special. But that interview with him about
unbelievable
the choices for his greatness book or whatever, it's not.
How do you say that aloud?
Kind of racist and misogynist. It's just straight up racist and misogynist. He's like, oh well, women and black people aren't as articulate. So I was like, whoa.
Yeah, usually when you're being racist and misogynist, and you think to yourself, I should probably not say this.
Yeah, no, I was like, okay,
I don't know.
Just wear it loud and proud, man.
Going for it.
The less said about that, probably the better.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else are you reading other than Andre Dubus? You saved a book from last week, as I recall.
I did, which means I could have two more books to talk about. So the one I didn't talk about last time was a book called Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon.
I've seen the cover of that.
Yeah. And it's, like let's call it a romantic comedy.
Right.
I was showing it to somebody in the store recently and they said, "You read this book?" I don't know.
Speaking of literature.
Yeah. Well, so Rachel Lynn Solomon wrote a book previously called The X Talk, which was about
I remember you liked that.
Yeah, I think I talked about it on the show where it
They're
really
the NPR
probably would have been
hosts,
early days.
right, or something?
Yeah. NPR hosts, and I think she's from Seattle, so I think that's where it's set. And that was like delightful, and it looks pretty standard rom-com, enemies to lovers, whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this book is about a ghostwriter, and she takes the job of writing the memoir of a kind of a TV actor who was on a cult hit about werewolves, but like 10 years ago.
Okay.
And now they're doing like a reunion episode, and he makes a living. He's like, it's hard for him to get good acting jobs now, but he makes some like Hallmark movies every once in a while. And he makes a living really by going to cons, like Comic Cons, where like his fans are like rabid, and like he sells his autograph for
signing at the table. Yeah.
So the book is the ghostwriter accompanying him on a tour of the cons, while he like at night tells his life story to her so she can write his memoir.
Oh, I like it. I'm in.
And they fall for each other or whatever.
Shocker.
But
I did not see that coming.
Except, so the setup is before she takes the job, before they know each other, she has a one-night stand with him. This is the opening. She has like a one-night stand. She's never had a one-night stand.
Oh, yeah.
With this cute guy she meets at a bar.
Mm-hmm.
But the sex is terrible. Right? And she's like, oh my God, like everything was so good until like he really didn't know what he was doing. And then the next day she goes to this business meeting and is like, oh my God, it's the guy from the TV show. Yeah.
That is awkward.
Right. And then she still takes the job.
What are we going to do?
Together. But they end up having a conversation that's like, somehow it comes out that she's like, hey, the sex is really bad. And he's mortified. But then is like, maybe you could teach me how to have, So then she's giving him sex lessons.
Is it business or pleasure? That's the question.
So I will just say
that is awful transactional, but sure. I like it.
I mean, it's all very like sex positive and
yeah,
wonderful, but at the same time, it's much sexier, much more graphic than the previous book I read of hers.
Yes.
So there were definitely times I was listening
leveled up a little bit.
Yeah. I'm driving around my car being like, I need to turn the volume down.
Oh,
like,
audiobook.
What?
Oh my goodness gracious. No, I'm not sure if that's an audiobook. Holy
it was very
different animal.
Yeah. So yeah, it was more than I was expecting.
Stoplight.
Like roll the windows up.
Wow,
oh
my goodness gracious. Where did that come from? Is that Terry Gross?
I mean, I think we're veering more into like just like actual romance novels, which I think do get much racier than
I'm sure they do.
It was not Emily Henry. Whereas, we got some light petting and like lots of teasing.
I like that.
It was good.
Business
like
or pleasure. I think
positive.
it's pretty clear from the title what we're going to get here.
Yep. But so if that's your thing, definitely.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Let's see. So in my
Did you have anything else?
Yeah. In my other book, there is a awkward sex scene, actually. A colonial. No, let's see. I guess at this point, it's a pre-Civil War era awkward sex scene in
fun
book. Yeah, it was very odd. This book is actually way weirder than I thought it was going to be. It's this Daniel book, North Woods. You gave to me.
Sweet! It comes out this week.
Yeah, that's why I read it on purpose.
North Woods.
It's called North Woods, And it's got an Anthony Mara quote on the cover that calls it a sui generis work of pure brilliance. So
I was looking
got
at
a
the
lot
blurbs
to
for
live
this
up
book,
to. Got a lot
and
to live
the
up to.
blurbs are insane. Tell us about this book, because it does sound kind of wacky.
Yeah. So basically, I thought it was going to be about Maine because we have the Northwoods, national
It's about
forest.
Massachusetts.
It's about
I
Massachusetts.
believe.
It's a little bit of a bait and switch there. But what it does is it takes a basically field of property in Massachusetts and follows the people who like occupy it, right? So it starts out with a like super early colonial era interaction where the indigenous people and the colonists clash and they die, and an apple that they have just eaten, the seed in their stomach grows into this like apple tree. Then a Revolutionary War era dude discovers and tastes and is the best apple he's ever tasted in his life and makes him be an orchard owner and moves his family to make a living on this apple. And then he begets the Osgood sisters, who are known worldwide for their amazing apples, but they are twins and die spinsters, except for this one time where she has an awkward interaction with George Carver down the street because she wanted to bang at least once before she died.
Oh, that's so sad.
Right. But then and that's about a third of the way through the book, right? And I'm like, what is this book? Because there's it's just following a tree, and it's about this apple. And I'm like, why is it called the Northwoods? It's all about this apple tree. It should be called like the Wonder or something, because that's the name of the apple, the Osgood Wonder. And I'm like, is it serious or not serious? And then I'm not going to ruin it. But then like this thing happens. I'm like, oh, this book is not serious. Like that is the most ridiculous. Yeah. Like, I was like, what just happened? And so it becomes much more.
And so it takes us to contemporary times eventually?
Yes. And like each section is written in a completely different style. So you get like journal entry of this colonist in like this old timey voice. And then you just get normal third person omniscient. And then you get like songs that these people have written. And then you get an epistolary section between like an artist and his gay lover. And then you get like, so it's like changing the channel completely. And the only through line is this piece of property. And it's just like super weird. Like I wanted to mention, because it opens almost exactly like the Vaster Wilds, right? So the time period of the Vaster Wilds is the exact time period of this open to the Northwoods. So I was like, oh, it's going to be like a Vaster Wilds book. Cool, And then all of a sudden it's just, oh, it's a different time period. Oh, it's a different time period. Oh, and it just keeps jumping forward. And once you get what it's doing, it's much more like...
it reminds me of Homegoing.
I didn't read Homegoing. Yeah.
Homegoing is like, you get it at each chapter, each section is kind of the ancestor of the character before. Yeah. So it takes you through
generation to generation. Kind of similar. Similar. It's also, it reminds me of like a David Mitchell book a little bit, where
that's a high compliment.
Yeah, it is. Actually, it has David Mitchell qualities in that, like in a David Mitchell book, they'll just like everybody has a birthmark or whatever that is the through line. And so because the through line is so random, it allows him to tell like all these different little short stories essentially. But it has this sense of place, and I don't know, I liked it.
Okay. Can I tell you though that there's like a mountain lion on the cover or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So I've in my head been getting it confused with that book Open Throat I read.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is narrated by a mountain lion.
Right.
So in my head, Northwoods is narrated by a family of mountain lions who have lived.
So there's no talking mountain lions in this book. Although it wouldn't surprise me after reading it. It's just like, you get in your head that this is like I said, like the Vaster Wilds book is like super gritty and realistic and like it's like you're watching this movie as this girl goes through the woods. And that's what I thought I was getting here. And then I'm like, oh, we're hitting people with axes. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. My other book is called The Square of Sevens.
Hmm.
And it is also historical, so we can give it that.
Yeah.
It's by Laura Shepard Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
It came out September 5th. And it is like, I get a lot of people who come in the store and they're like, I want a good epic novel. And I don't know if this is epic, but it's like very intricately told. It's an intricate story and it's long and it's very enjoyable. I feel like you would like it, actually.
Yeah.
There are lots of twists and turns and
long.
it's
How?
Well, it's just this. Well, I'm listening to the audiobook and it's like, I don't know how many hours, but it's a lot of hours.
Right.
The book itself doesn't actually, in your hand, doesn't, it's not like Covenant of Water long or anything. It's only 800 pages.
That book, I'm never going to read that book. I'm sorry.
I have a hard time.
It's just like that new John Irving chairlift book. I'm not going to read that chairlift book. Right. No.
This one's 528 pages.
Okay, that's not that bad.
Yeah. So it's set in the 18th century in England, and it's the story of a young fortune teller. Mm-hmm. So this girl is raised for the first 7 years by her dad, who's everyone calls him a gypsy, and he's always like, I'm not a gypsy. But he teaches her the Square of Sevens, which is this like ancient fortune telling situation with a deck of cards.
Yeah.
So she lays the Square of Seven and can tell your future, tell your fortune.
That's good. And
then when she's 7, her dad dies and she is sent to Bath, and we kind of catch up with her again when she's 17 and her guardian dies. And so now she's, again, kind of orphaned and realizes that her parents maybe aren't who she thought they were. She never knew her mom, but she discovers her mom is part of this really, really rich family who are currently in a serious court battle to figure out who's the heir to the fortune.
Whoa. Sounds like.
And then she's like, I might be the heir to the fortune, but she has to prove who she is. And no one wants her to.
Roger.
Yeah. No one wants her to be who she is, because then she would get the fortune.
Wow.
So it's this very like tricky social situation that she like dives into. And the whole time you're like, is she gonna figure a way through this? And if she doesn't, she's like a penniless pauper, So, and we're rooting for her. She's a great character, and like I said, there's like lots of twists and turns and discoveries in each chapter. So you're always on your toes. I really like it.
That's the plot is remarkably similar to Zadie
what?
Smith. To Zadie Smith.
Oh, right.
That's the whole thing. The fraud. Like, is this person really the heir to the fortune or not? No.
Yeah, but this one has lots of fortune telling.
Is it like fraudulent fortune telling, or it's like magical realism fortune telling?
I would say the implication is that the Square of Seven, she believes in she believes in the cards, but they have her occasionally like lying to the people she's telling the fortune to, like, and is that okay? And she befriends an astrologer who is like, bad things are going to happen to you if you don't listen to the card. You have to be true to the cards or whatever.
There's in Friday Black, there's a short story about doing that.
I don't remember.
Dude pays a fortune teller to tell his girlfriend what's going to happen with their babies so that she'll have an abortion.
Right.
Super evil.
Yeah. But that's basically all I have.
Yeah, really. That's all I have too. That was a solid amount of stuff that we just talked about. Can we talk about our next big event yet, or no?
We're announcing it in a couple days, which will be about when the podcast
When are we
comes
announcing
out.
it? Podcast is going to come out on the 21st.
I was thinking we'd announce it on Thursday. What's that?
Right, so that's the 21st. Yeah.
Oh.
So we should
I guess
announce
let's
it
do it.
now to
Let's
look
do
like
it.
we know what we're doing.
Yeah,
So big
okay.
news is
We have an event on Tuesday, November 14th,
wow.
7 p.m. with
Who?
Ellen Hildebrand and Meg Mitchell-Moore.
My goodness gracious. That is stunning.
That's big.
It's big time. Super big time.
Big time. So you
Super
should
big.
head over to our website. There's an events tab at bookshopofbeverlyfarms.com. And you will need to book a ticket. You have
Yes.
2 ticket options. There's a $5 general admission. But if you want to get your book signed by either Ellen or Meg, you need to get yourself a signing line ticket
Yes.
with a book. You have to buy a book too. It's all on the website. Go check it out. But get your tickets because we expect this to sell out.
Yes. Because there's going to be 250 people there. And
Yep.
just think, if all 250 of you took 1 minute with Ellen and Meg, that's a lot of minutes. And they're not going to stay there for 2.5 hours. So you got to get one of these exclusive signing line tickets ahead of time. Otherwise, it's going to be too bad, so sad for you. And we don't want that to happen.
Right. You'll still get to obviously see a great event.
Right.
You just
Yes.
won't get to get your book signed and say hi.
By them in the moment. But you can have a signed book because they'll sign them ahead of time.
Mhm.
Also, I want to give a quick mention to Matthew Henry, who's doing a poetry reading with us on
Yes.
October 12th. This is in the shop. I really don't know Matthew at all. He reached out to us via email and we were like, let's give it a go. But the more I look into him, this guy is a dude. And I think this event is going to be like really cool. And even if you've never heard of him, even if you're not a poetry reader, it appears that this dude spends a lot of time thinking about the future of Boston. And I think he's got some awesome stuff to say. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to have to roll down for this event, I think. Although
He'll be your new best friend. We'll each have
actually,
new best friends.
it's on a Thursday, so it's probably not going to happen because I'm going to be playing music. But we'll figure it out.
You'll be there
Anyway,
in spirit.
I'll be there in spirit. Anyway, it's saying that my hard drive is full and that we need to end this recording. Otherwise, I won't be able to record it off. So
Okay. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
see you later, everybody. Bye.